And welcome to AXSChat. Today, I'm delighted to have Malin Rygg as guest with us. Malin works for Difi, which is the Norwegian inclusive design agency, which effectively teaches everyone and also enforces inclusive design in Norway. So Norway is an absolute global leader when it comes to accessibility. Helps to have some oil money.
Well,
But absolutely, and some absolute backing of the government to do all this kind of stuff. Um, I think it's really exciting the work that you're doing. We met at the Funka conference in Stockholm a few weeks back, and the running joke was the competition between Sweden and Norway as to who's going to be more accessible, and the consensus was that you guys are ahead at the moment. So congratulations. Can you tell us a little bit more about the work of Difi and how you came to work in accessibility? Because it wasn't your original career path for sure.
yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here and talk about accessibility. I think it's a really good initiative that we can come together and discuss thoughts and ideas and, across borders. And that's why I enjoyed Funka as well, because you get inspiration from all over the world. There was a lot of great speakers there. And I'm very happy to be here now to talk about the Norwegian uh, effort on accessibility. And then I want to just, counter that about the oil money, because I go around saying that this is actually very business-wise to do. It's business-wise for you as a society, and it's business-wise for you as a business. So
Yes, absolutely. I was tongue in cheek, but absolutely, it is. It makes good business sense, and we make the same arguments throughout the globe. Both Deborah and I spend a lot of time talking about why accessibility is good for business. So I am just
we're on the
fully
same page
convinced.
then. I have a background in law. I was a lawyer and I was a judge, and I worked with the competition authority before I started in Difi in 2010. And there I worked with procurement in another department. But then when we established this new authority and inspectorate as part of Difi, I was asked to head it, and I've been doing that since 2013.
And so, what was your interest in accessibility, or was it a case of here's this thing that we're assigning to you. We think we think you'll do a good job, and you had a steep learning curve, or was it something that you were already interested in, and that you lobbied to get the role?
Well, I did love it to get the role, but it was more. I didn't know. I must be honest. I didn't know anything about accessibility. I did put requirements for accessibility in some of the procurements that we did before, but I was not really that interested. But I have a very good colleague of mine who was really passionate about this area and who was, asking me, couldn't you apply for this job? And we would so much like to get you on board here. And then after that, it was a very steep learning curve, but I'm very glad I did. I'm very happy to work in this area, and I have a lot of really nice colleagues. So,
Excellent. So I know Antonia's got a question. So Antonia?
Okay, hi Mal. Thank you so much for joining us. No, like you were saying, I'm curious about about the beginning. Can you explain us how you were able to build your team and going back to those days and today, what type of changes that team has passed through?
yes. Oh, that's a very interesting question. The first time universal design, as we call accessibility in Norway, we refer to it as universal design. So if I say universal design, I hope it's okay. It was the first time it was mentioned in a public report is 2001 actually. And then they talked about doing some regulatory things to improve universal design, and then it took some time. One thought that maybe the market would do this itself because it is business-wise, but it didn't happen. So in 2008, they passed the anti-discrimination law, and then in 2013, the regulation. And that was really hard work from a lot of people to get this law passed. I came in 2013 when the law was, I started actually the same day as the law was passed. So then it was my job to try to put together a team that could work with this subject as a field of law, which is very challenging because it's a new thing, or relatively new thing, technology-wise, you know, with new technologies and different kinds of websites, apps, things, you know, ICT solutions, new ones coming all the time. And then it's, of course, a very new area within the law, field of law, because it's not like we could just look to Sweden or Germany or somebody else and just say, okay, we do it that way. So we had to kind of start with two bare hands, or how you're going to put it, and just try to figure out how are we going to go about this. And therefore, we very early on set out to do at least two things at the same time. We have, of course, to control this. It's a law. It's our task to control the websites and the apps and the also self-serving machines, which is also within our law.
Okay.
Yeah. But then we thought, okay, in Norway, it's 100,000 businesses with 4 employees or more. It's not like this law is applying to all companies, all businesses, both in public and in private sector. Of course, there are maybe 400,000 or 500,000 businesses in Norway, but let's stick to a bit bigger ones with 4 employees or more. How are you going to lift 100,000 businesses over on a new standard platform, you know, with a VCAG as a requirement? How are you going to do that? Are you going to go about controlling one after one after one? You will never, ever, you know, get to the finish line. So we thought we're going to have to put a lot of effort into motivating and work with guidance and try to make people understand that this is not only the thing you have to do, it's also a thing it's smart to do. You should do it. It's a lot of good reasons to do it. Yeah. So we very early on started putting a lot of emphasis on guidance. And then we also thought we can go about just controlling some here, some there, but how can we make the most effect of this? So we started from the very get-go to do surveys, make analysis, gather data, try to find out where are the biggest hurdles or the biggest barriers today, which ICT solutions have the furthest to go, which ICT solutions is most important for you in everyday life, and which ICT solutions has the bigger user groups. So we could target our control mechanism as, you know, as effectively as possible. So yeah, so then when I put together the team, I actually hired, of course, people with a technological background, preferably somebody who knew something about universal design. But that was hard in the beginning, but it's because it's not plenty, it wasn't plenty of people who had that background. And then we put together people from the law, you know, lawyers or previous, and also economists and statistics, people that could statistics and analysis as a subject. And then we have 2 people working only with communication, and our website where we put all our guidance and everything you need to know about how to fulfill the requirements, and then best practice and examples, and also our inspections reports. Everything is put on our website, so we do a lot of work there.
So I know Deborah's got a question, but I wanted to just backtrack on a couple of points, and I want to make it clear. You're saying that you're making all websites, not public sector websites. The law is that all websites must meet WCAG 2AA. That's You're pretty much you're unique in that respect. So credit to you for doing that, because most people have just left it to the public sector. And also last week we featured Rama from the Royal College of Art and the Helen Hamlin Centre, and we had a discussion about universal design versus inclusive. And you're talking about universal, and he said universal is impossible, but inclusive is possible. So some of it is semantics, because you want to include as many people as possible, but I just wondered whether or not you had any thoughts about why choose universal rather than inclusive. And then I'll hand to Deborah.
Well, I don't know if it was. I feel it was more than one question, but so I don't know how to start. But to just start with the private sector issue, there was a lot of opposition against applying the law to the private sector. Therefore, they put a safety valve, so to speak, in the law, and said that you could ask me or the authority for an exemption, a delay of the deadline by which you had to be compliant, if you could prove that it was unduly expensive to, and that was kind of the thing that made it pass also for private sector. So now, after 3 years, you can ask me how many applications for exemption have we gotten from the private sector?
Go on.
None.
How many? Fantastic.
None. So
Wow.
that is what I try to voice with the, for instance, when I talk to my colleagues in Europe, that it is actually, it hasn't been a problem, and that I don't say this as like it would never be a problem. Maybe with some new technology things could be difficult and you would need some more time, and of course we are open to discussing it, but it's not like we've had a ton of exception applications about everybody trying to get out of this regulation. Not at all. We haven't gotten one, and we do inspections all the time, and one of the inspections we did this year was with a major bank, which came out with the best inspection results so far, which is a private company, of course. So I think it's a bit overrated, all these opposition against including the private sector, because it has a lot of really, I think, good side effects. For instance, we see something in the supplier, on the supplier side after this regulation, because everybody is requiring the same thing, Everybody is supposed to have a website that is compliant with the WCAG. That means that it's no longer just the companies that specializes in universal design that can offer this. All the big companies offer it as well. It's more of a standard thing to offer now. So that maybe brings me to what I think maybe was your next question. Do we think that by making all Norwegian websites compliant to WCAG, all websites are accessible? Of course not. They're not accessible, but they are on one step further up the ladder, I would say. Instead of having no regulation and starting at the bottom, we're starting at, maybe step 1 or 2. You do a lot of good work just by complying to the WCAG. And then you should do a lot more, of course, we think. But then if you bring all up to this level, maybe you can look at new standards later on. Then, of course, we get the side effect that people that start to work with the WCAG and start to have to look at what users need, why is this regulation so and so, what are the purpose, then they tend to want to do more. They start to getting the hang of it. So that's one of the side effects, maybe you could say as well. We see that management now have to deal with this in some level. It's not like before that you can say it's good for your reputation, or it's the right thing to do. Now all businesses have to do it, so management have to somewhat relate to these issues. So it's more the awareness goes up.
Sure.
Yeah.
Deborah, I'll hand over. I've been holding on again.
Thanks for being on today. We are very excited about having you come on and talk about this because it really is a best practice. I know that we can learn a lot from what you're doing, excuse me, globally, but certainly in the United States too. You had talked about some of the benefits that you've seen. Have you seen benefits in that more people with disabilities are getting jobs overall, or specifically in the field, or a combination? So I'm just curious about employment benefits.
Yeah, yeah, I understand. We haven't done any surveys on that question at the moment. I know another called the Delta Center in Norway are working on looking on those kind of effects. So I don't really have a good answer for you at the moment. Although we've had this regulation in place since 2013, we still feel like it's early days. It takes a lot of time to implement it, you know, all over. It's at the moment only new ICT solution has to comply. By 2021, it's all ICT solution has to comply. But at the moment, it's only if your contract was signed after 1st of July 2013 that you have to comply. So it's an upgoing curve, but at the moment, of course, it's not everybody.
Well, and just to follow up on that, one thing that I see is leaders like you and your country and your team. A lot of times I know it's an ongoing thing. None of us are perfect, but you really get a lot of credit for all of the efforts you're doing, that you're including the private and the public sector. So we appreciate your leadership. Another question, that one thing that we see all over the world is that there's not enough people that know how to do this. There's not enough accessibility technologists, inclusion designer. There's just not enough people. How have y'all dealt with those type of things? As all the corporations and businesses, public and private, everybody tries to become more accessible to the standard. How are you dealing with are y'all dealing with not enough talent that knows how to do these tasks?
Yeah, well, we try to do our best by providing on our website as much guidance as possible. For instance, how do you do this? E-learning courses and different kinds of way to guidance people that are doing it themselves. Firstly, or mostly targeted on the people that are publishing things online. Then, of course, it's the designers and the developers. So we try to target them also with different kind of courses or conferences and things like that. But of course, there's this is a problem. This is why we also been very engaged in trying to get this into different kinds of education. Universal design should be a subject in different kinds of education, we think, and is one of the things that we're trying to do something about this year. And we also work with the Universal Universal.no, which works with universal design as in higher education. So we try to, work very broadly, have a very broad perspective, both getting into education. We see now master's degrees on universal design is picking up, and both learning the ones that are doing this from day to day, and then trying to, give a push to everyone who wants to go for this with the education and try to educate more people. But I must also say that, of course, in Norway, with this VCAG approach very broadly on private and public sector, I don't, as I said to Neil before, this doesn't mean that every website will be accessible to all. But it's more of a balance between corporate interest in one you know, in one corner saying this is expensive, we can't do so much, and then the individual interest in the rights of the people on the other. And then we've just said that, okay, VCAG AA level, that's the minimum. That's, of course, you know, it's a balance. It's not a perfect solution, it's a compromise.
I agree.
Yes, and that is why we as an authority is not an advocate for individual rights like lawyers or anybody else would be. We try to enforce the law. We see it's not perfect, but it's for the moment a good compromise, I think, between different kind of interests. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's how you have progress. So good for you. Thank you.
So I've got a question about the enforcement side of things. Have you had to use your enforcement powers against any particular or don't name the organization, but have you had to use the enforcement powers to make sure that non-compliant companies or organizations make changes to their websites?
Well, we have done inspections last year and this year. Last year was the first year because it wasn't so many new ICT solutions in 2014, and then we also had to develop a test methodology. You know, that wasn't in existence a test methodology that we could just use. We had to build our own from the very beginning. But we've found deviations or non-compliance in all our inspections. But we haven't issued any order of correction, which is our first sanction. If we find non-compliance and they do not provide a good plan for how to correct it and when, we can issue an order of correction. If that order of correction isn't followed up, or the plan is never submitted or anything like that, we can issue daily fines. The daily fines will then just run and run and run until the fault is corrected. But but as we haven't issued any order of correction, which would be the first step, we have also not issued any fines. It's not like, you know, we go out and find a website and then we find everything that's wrong with it and then just issue fines, you know, like we have a lot of dialogue with the business. We try to explain why this regulation is in place and how they can also be in a dialogue with them how they can correct it. And so far we've had actually very positive responses. They are very positive that somebody, what should I say, neutral is coming and checking how things are going. So far we've probably been lucky, but we've met in all the businesses, we've met some people that are really engaged in universal design themselves, so they're very glad to get this report to show to management what we have to do next and how we're going to go forward, you know. So we've had so much positive actually feedback from the inspection so far, so we will see. Of course, we do what we call risk-based inspections. So we start with the companies that have big user groups that provide services that is important for you in your everyday life, like banking, transporting, public services and stuff. So we don't go on the very smallest businesses from the beginning. The nearer you come to 2021, when everybody has to comply, the more broadly we will, of course, inspect. But at the moment, we've done mostly with bigger companies, okay, which have a bit more resources, of course.
So that leads me on to another question, which is around, as you approach your 2021 deadline, and you've talked about testing methodology, surely you're going to have to ramp up the number of resources or deploy automated testing to a certain extent to be able to cope with the scale of dealing with all of those smaller websites, because once you get down to those small companies, they proliferate really quickly and you've got a huge amount of work and testing to do.
Yeah. So at the moment, we only test manually. We only test manually both in our inspections and in our surveys. This is why we put so much effort into our test methodology. We have looked at it from the beginning or from the get-go as an interdisciplinary thing. It's not only testing whether or not you comply to the VCAG, itself. Of course, that's the core, but it has to be looked at as VCAG as a legal text. When can we find somebody? What is non-compliant? So we have to go into every success criterion and look at it very closely, both from a legal perspective and a technological perspective. And we look at the techniques, of course, and how to solve the different success criteria. But we also then build into our test methodology statistical, a statistical perspective. And that is with the very distinct ambition to do some of it automatically after a while. Of course, there are a lot of tools there already. We could, of course, use them. The thing is, we want to know for sure how they test versus how we test, how we understand the VCAG before we apply it. So we are aiming to publish our indicators, our test indicators for the whole of the VCAG later this year, in order to get feedback from people like you and everybody else who would be interested to how we interpret the VCAG, and then build thereon to maybe either look at tools, building tools ourselves, looking what tools are offered in the market. Well, that's the next step. But first of all, we have to publish our indicators to get kind of a base to stand on. But I do agree with you. We have to ramp it up. We have to go through a lot of more websites than we do at the moment. And that will require some kind of automated testing, at least for survey purposes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, Antonio, I think you had another question, didn't you?
Yeah, it's related to in the fact that in Norway a large number of population they have mobile devices. So mobile is a very important fact here. So and consumers, people tend to use mobile to purchase goods, to be mobile and to consume information as well. Is there any numbers that you can provide us in terms of numbers of people in Norway who are using mobile to do to buy things online, in terms of retail or just to buy their own groceries? And in those numbers, when you are trying to explain business about the importance of accessibility, is that something that they see immediately as the benefit, considering that the population is getting older and at the same time is getting mobile? Are you able to see the relation between the two?
I must say, at the moment, I'm not sure if we have, or I think we should have the numbers for how much content is consumed over the mobile phone, but I don't have it in my head at the moment. But we can look it up and see if we could send you some. But what I do know is that we have one company called Stormberg who did work with universal design before it was a requirement by the law. It just not only because they wanted to include more people, but also as the second goal to sell more over the mobile phone. And they have success with that. And they had some numbers how their sales of, they sell clothing, sports clothing, how the sales went up. From 2012, I think, to 2014. And much more of their sales go over iPads and phones than before. And they, following the VCAG, actually does help in making the site perform better on a mobile phone. So they did it for business reasons as well as, of course, to be more inclusive. Yeah. Was that an answer on your question, or?
Yes, yes. No, and I would use this to ask that is what type of engagement you had with organizations working with people with disabilities? What type of a voice they have, feedback, all that engagement happens?
Yeah. Well, we do, of course, put a lot of emphasis in talking to the organization that represent different kinds of disabilities, the Association of the Blind and the Association of, I don't know the English term for everybody, but we do in September every year dialogue meetings with all the organization in Norway. And we do also dialogue meetings then with associations for the businesses and other organizations that have something to do with this area. Especially, we've talked several times to the Organization for the Elderly, which we have had a very good cooperation with them, because it's of course important for us to hear what do their members tell them about their biggest obstacles to use digital services. That I think is very, very important information for us when targeting what we are gonna test, for instance, you know. Yeah.
Neil, you have any question, or are you in mute?
I am on mute, and I do have a question before we finish up, because I think we're close to our end of time. So, obviously, you've talked about the fact that you have responsibility for terminals and kiosks as well, and Antonio's just mentioned the elephant in the room as far as WCAG is concerned, which is mobile, because WCAG was pretty much written before mobile and smartphones were ubiquitous. Well, maybe not in Scandinavia, because obviously you're early adopters, but and there was a bit of a mobile powerhouse not too far away from you in Finland at the time, but parts of WCAG don't work on mobile. So what do you do in situations where the technology doesn't allow for WCAG? So are you developing your own methodology for that part of your remit as well?
Well, at the moment, we haven't started doing inspections on apps and on mobile phones. But what we tend to do is look at the purpose of the law. What is the purpose of it? It's, of course, to include as many as possible, you know, and that will guide us also when we look at the requirements for mobile phone, I think. So we have to look at that when we start our next chapter of the test methodology. But of course, if it's impossible to meet the requirements or it doesn't make sense, we won't enforce it in that way. But what we will do is propose legislation to change, you know, change to the legislation, so that because that is, I think, key for us at all stages, that the requirements are up to date, you know, that the regulation is up to date with new technologies. It might come something next year we haven't even thought about so far. So we have to, you know, keep a keen eye on all kind of technology development, and just come up with good suggestions for changing the legislation with the same purpose in mind, to include as many people as possible.
Excellent. I think we're at the end of our half hour, so I'd like to thank you very much for joining us. It's been fascinating. I know that I want to share this talk with a lot of my colleagues, because we're an international, I work for an international company. Want to share with them your feedback about the fact that most companies actually don't resist in the end, which is great to hear. And also ask, you mentioned that you've got statisticians and so on working for you. Are you planning to publish all of this sort of your findings and data in English? Because I couldn't see it on the website. There's only a little bit of English on the website at the moment, and I'm not great with my Norwegian.
I would love to have a lot of more of our content in English. At the moment, it's a resource question, but we do have a report which I can share with you on our status survey from 2014. just to show you, that is translated in English, so it will give you an overview of the status in Norway as the legislation took effect. So that's what we have so far. So
that sounds brilliant. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
thank you. It was very nice being here. Thank you.